What is going on? We're going to interrupt this video really quick to let you know that this video today is sponsored by Audible. Audible is an awesome service. It's also a mobile app that has a ton of books on audio that you can listen to.
So guys, I use Audible for it's an easy way. I'm not as big of a reader as this guy right here, but I do like to listen to my books. So Audible's a great service for when I'm walking around. A book that I really like to listen to is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Like I said, it's great for if you're just taking a stroll and you want to consume that type of content, but you want to do it through your ears instead of through reading it.
So if you guys want to get some mind gains and start listening to some awesome books like we do, all you have to do is click the link below in the description. It's audible.com/ZenDudeFitness. You're gonna get a free 30-day trial when you sign up. So give it a try for 30 days. If you like it, continue. If you don't, all good. Let's get back to this interview.
What is going on, Zen Dude Nation? Everyone, we want to welcome you to today. The podcast is set up a little bit differently today. We have a very special guest, Tom Bilyeu, former co-founder and CEO of Quest Nutrition, now current CEO of Impact Theory.
Yes.
Tom, what's going on, man?
What is up, gentlemen? Thank you for having me on the show. It's good to be here.
Yeah,
My
good
man,
to be here.
we were pretty stoked, and we're pretty stoked on your setup. Like looking around, everyone who watched our show is like, "Yo, Zen Dude's like, what? How'd you get this set up? Because this is pretty legit." So man, thanks for having us in your studio and having us in here. And I think really the reason why we're doing this segment for our audience is, they're Zen dudes, the people who are, and dudettes, we got our dudettes out there as well, but they're people who are really interested in just like living fulfilled lives. And so they've learned jump rope and fitness through us, but now we want to take it to another level and be like, well, how can you start to plug holes in different areas of your life just to be more fulfilled? Channel your inner Zen. So
Dig it.
we've been watching your show for a while and feel like you have a lot to give. And so we appreciate you being so generous through the time. We want to dig into you, man. The first question I have that I'm really interested in is, and just so everyone knows, like we already mentioned this, but Tom is the creator, co-founder of Quest. And so once you sold Quest, you had an opportunity to like kind of decide your next move. Like why Impact Theory versus like future technology? Because I know you're involved in X Prize and a lot of other cool stuff.
It really was me playing a game that I called No Bullshit, What Would It Take? And I wanted to get as many people out of the matrix as humanly possible. And the truth is, I just think that the way for me to get the most people out is through Impact Theory. And technology is amazing, and I love it, and I love the X Prize, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff there, and I'm honored to be a part of it. But in terms of pulling people out of the matrix, I don't think that's the play.
That's awesome, man.
And how would you just describe to us quickly Impact Theory and what it does, what the overall vision is, and everything?
It literally is a traditional narrative studio. So from comic books, TV shows, movies, the whole nine. It's the way that people build their belief system, which is really what I want to tap into. And just looking at not trying to change behavior, but trying to leverage it. What do people already do? And so they're already engaging with that kind of content. So we wanted to have the discipline, because Disney's been doing their thing for a very long time, but nobody's had the discipline to really recreate what they've done. And their whole thing was everything fed into the brand. So if I say I'm going to go see a Warner Brothers movie, or I say I'm going to go see a Sony movie, you don't know anything about it. But if I say I'm going to go see a Disney movie, you already know something about it. And that's been out there forever, but nobody's really been able to replicate it because they just want to tell great stories. And I totally get that, and we all have that same impulse, but the reality is it all has to feed into a brand ethos. It all has to feed into a mission. And so for us, at the center of what we do is that mission of pulling people out of the matrix. And so if we can really be disciplined and do what I think that we can do, everything that we create, every piece of content, from the stuff that we're doing socially to the stuff that we'll ultimately do on the traditional narrative side, is all going to be about empowerment. If we can do that, then the brand will actually mean something. It will stand for something, and you can leverage what's called a total merchandising strategy. At the end of the day is really what we're about is that. And you've got to create something that's a sustainable business model. And so that's why I wanted to do that, because when you look at what really allows people to build their sense of identity, one of the most potent things that we have is narrative. And so we're taking so much in from mythology. We're taking so much in from the stories that we tell each other. We're taking so much in from the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, that if you can take control of that process, then you can really take control of the mindset. And at the end of the day, the mindset is the driving force behind everything that we do here, for sure.
Yeah. Dude, this is so amazing. There's so many parts of that I want to like pull a thread on, but I want to start with finding out when you realize, like the moment where you really realized that like you were in the Matrix and then like starting to take yourself out. Like, how old were you? How did that come to be? Because that seems like to be the theme that's running through everything all the way up into this moment. To like, you had that aha moment, and now you're going and you're sharing on a massive level. So, what was that?
It really was. So my parents raised me to be a good employee, which means keep your head down, do as little work as possible, and avoid punishment at all costs. And that's how I came up. And I didn't know. I'm not a born entrepreneur. I think that's really important to understand about me. And as you guys know, it's really easy to show a physical transformation, right? So I used to be 60 pounds heavier. So it's very easy for me to, put up the photo. Here I am, 60 pounds heavier. Here I am with six-pack abs. People get that. But it's very hard for them to understand a mental transformation. It's like, what do you show to show that?
Yeah.
And the very distressing thing that everybody leans on is just money, right? So, but that to me is not the natural outcome of changing your mindset. So finding ways to really walk people through that process is hard. But I will say that I started as a typical employee. I felt that I could be more. I could do more with my life. I didn't know how or what. I didn't know why I had that feeling. And then I saw the movie in 1999, The Matrix, and it gave me the words to like really say, okay, that's what's happening to me. And I remember seeing that. So I went to a Comic-Con here in Los Angeles at the Shrine Auditorium, which at some point I'm sure you guys will encounter now that you live here. Go to the Shrine Auditorium. I walk around the corner, and there's Keanu Reeves, Joe Pantoliano, Carrie Moss, Joel Silver, the producer. I don't remember a couple other people. And I was just like I had no idea they were there. And they were like, oh, we're giving out these tickets to this new movie called The Matrix. And I was like, oh my God, I've seen the trailer to that. I'm like really intrigued. I want to see it. It looks like great sci-fi. I go to the movie, and it's actually at Warner Brothers because it's a pre-screening. People come out of the screening before me, and they're just yelling. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? Go in, and do you guys, like, you're pretty young, so I don't know if you didn't see it in the theater, I'm guessing. But it was the weirdest movie-going experience I'd ever had in my entire life. Have you guys seen it?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so the moment where Carrie-Anne Moss jumps up and like it does that freeze time thing, the audience went ballistic and they just start yelling at the screen. And I was like, I'd never seen anything like it, but it was so intense and amazing. It just really, really captivated me. But the important part for me was the ideology that was in the movie, where it's like this guy is living a life that he absolutely hates, feels totally drained. It's like the typical 9-to-5 bullshit. It's like eroding his soul, right? But there's this other side of him that like is asking this question, what is the Matrix, right? And I think he actually says at one point, or no, it's Morpheus that says it, you could do more, you could be more, right? But something's holding you back, you didn't know what. And that's exactly how I felt. And so coming out of the movie, I was like, okay, what is the Matrix? Like in the real world, right? What is the Matrix? And I began to, and none of this was like a lightning rod moment. The movie planted a seed, and it's very easy to sort of mythologize, but it did give me the words to really begin to understand the feeling. But then over time, what became clear was that the Matrix was my mindset, that I had all these limiting beliefs about myself that I had created, that sure, like my parents had made readily available, the society had made readily available, but at the end of the day, it was up to me whether I adopted them, kept them, got rid of them, replaced them with something else. But what was my kung fu? And it took me a couple of years to find that, but there were two things as a sort of teetering between white collar and blue collar kid in Tacoma in a morbidly obese family who was himself a little bit chubby. There were two promises that I made myself. One day I would be rich, and one day I would have six-pack abs. And I had no idea how I was going to get either of those things, but I just knew that like they were so core and fundamental to what I wanted in my life that when that moment came where I saw these two guys and they were self-made multimillionaires and they were jacked. And I was just like, oh my, like this is it. This is what I've been looking for, right? And off camera, we were talking, if you want to learn a skill, find somebody that's really at the top of their game. And so I saw these guys, they were successful entrepreneurs. They obviously knew how to transform their physiques. And so I just latched on. And those are the guys that end up becoming my partners in Quest Nutrition, and all of that become very important in my life. But at the time, it was just, they understood two things that I didn't understand. They understood physique, muscle, leanness, and they understood business. And in that process of then working with them, and they hired me as a copywriter, but they said, look, this is a startup, man. So like you can become anything you want. Don't think of yourself as a copywriter. Like that's just your tuition. Like what do you really want to do? Gain the skills, and you can do anything you set your mind to. And so I took them seriously, and I started like really getting into skill acquisition. And in that process, like the movie just kept coming to my mind, like business is my kung fu. And so what's my version of jacking into the matrix? And I had begun reading when I went to college and really found it powerful. But in that environment where I needed to acquire skills rapidly because I was so far behind them, they just knew so much more about business. And I didn't want to be like that dumb kid who didn't know anything. Like I really wanted to earn my spot at the table. So I just started reading as much as I could. And I started thinking of it as being jacked into the matrix, where I'm taking, something that may have taken somebody 30, 40 years to learn, they condense it down into something that I can digest in a week. Like that's about as close as, being in the matrix as you're going to get. And so just became an insanely voracious reader, learning as much as I could. And so like it's all a process, and I know you want that sort of one moment where it like all clicks home, and it never really worked like that. Like it's easy to mythologize it, but that movie just slowly over like a 5 or 6 year process became the most important iconography, ideology, symbols, like all of it was just like it solidified in my mind as the perfect metaphor for the human condition.
So in any ways, like what you did with Quest Nutrition seems like that was your grad school, and now impact theory is where you get to apply that kind of transformation that you went through mentally to help other people. Is that an accurate?
I love that. I've never thought of it like that, but I love that. So thank you. I'm going to steal that. So at Quest, I had intended for Quest to be my forever company, and didn't have any plans or intention to leave Quest. But I needed a platform company. I needed something where I could, as I grow and evolve, as I change, that it would change with me. And one of the lessons that I learned there is people gravitate to a company for a very certain thing in their life. And it's very hard for them to reimagine that company as something else. So we became known as a protein bar company, right? And so as I started doing Inside Quest, which is originally, so I created the 25 bullet points of the belief system, which you can find on impacttheory.com. And that was me saying to the employees, like, I don't feel good about this relationship unless you're getting something out of it. Like I live in absolute terror of being in a parasitic relationship with my employees, which is how the vast majority of millennials perceive their company, is it's taking something from me. And I really didn't want that. And business had given me so much more than it had taken from me that I wanted to make sure that we created an opportunity like that. So I write these 25 bullet points, which are the 25 things you need to do to your mind in order to succeed at anything. So whether it's boxing, like what you're doing, whether it's business, doesn't matter. Like these are the 25 things you have to do to your mind. And I was so afraid that they would just memorize the 25 bullet points, and people would. They would come up to me and be like, bullet point, number 12 is, and I'd be like, I have no idea what bullet point number 12 is. Like, I don't have them memorized in order, but I live them every day. Like, they were me turning inward and going, what was the process that I walked through to go through my own mental transformation? So I was so afraid they would memorize them but not live them that I wanted to show them this isn't about me. This is about what I call the physics of the mind. It's the universal principles that apply to anyone, anywhere. It's just what you need to do. And so I wanted to bring on all these successful people to do these interviews right there in front of the employees so that they could see, like, you're going to hear people, they don't know the 25 bullet points. I've never met them before, ever. But they're going to say the same things because it's so fundamental to the human condition. And so that's how it started. But it became this sort of bifurcated thing where it was like Inside Quest was developing its own audience, but it wasn't necessarily the same people that were eating the protein bars. So it became this schism. My partners and I began to not share the vision about where we were going, because pulling people out of the matrix is the most real thing for me. And like episode 2 or 3 of Inside Quest, I said, when I'm at my most honest and my most selfish, I want to pull people out of the matrix. Like that's what I don't believe in meant to be or anything like that, but that is certainly what I've shaped over time to be the most core thing to my existence. And, we can talk more about later. Like it started as like this big brother thing, and then it turned into working with all the people in the inner cities at Quest, which it just put at the core of my being the desire to see other people go through that mental transformation. Yeah. So realizing that I just wouldn't be satisfied if I didn't do that, that's when I decided to spin this off into a standalone company.
Very cool. It sounds like you went through like this apprenticeship through a ton of books and also through your business partners at Quest. And now this is your opportunity. And that was like a crucial part, just like, Neo in the Matrix. Like he went through this little apprenticeship where he was like learning the skills to like do everything that he did in the movie. And so that was like your opportunity to apprentice and like start to break through there. And so impact theory is like giving everyone else an opportunity to do the same thing. Because I think apprenticeship is so big and so undervalued in our society now.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that it was so spoken about in the Renaissance times. And even if you guys have read Benjamin Franklin's biography, I don't think he wrote it himself. It's amazing. Like that was just a thing. And you would go apprentice with somebody for a long time. I'm talking like 7, 8, 9 years that people would apprentice and really get good at something. And I'm just a huge believer in social media, and what you guys have done is incredible. So I know you know the power of social and building an audience. But it also terrifies me because people don't focus on getting good at something first. They try to build an audience. And it's like, I get it, but at the end of the day, like you're going to always be limited the size of the audience that you can build based on the amount of value that you can create. And so if your focus is primarily building that audience, I know how much time and energy that takes. So it leaves very little time for actually going and getting good at anything other than building an audience. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it becomes this catch-22 of, I get it, like you want to build the audience, and that's what you're going to get good at is building that audience, but then people are going to look at you and go, but what do they really do? Mm-hmm. Right? So it becomes this disconnect. So I am very grateful that I didn't have an option. Social media didn't exist. I didn't get my first computer until I was a junior in college. So it's like, and I didn't get the internet until afterwards. It's like, I just grew up in a really different time. Like, even though we're not like astronomically far apart in age, it's such a transitional period. I didn't have the time, or I didn't have the option. So I just had to put my head down and do the work because I thought it was the only way that I was going to generate wealth in my life. So I focused on getting good with the end goal of building a business, right? It wasn't with the end goal of, I never thought I'd build an audience. Like that didn't even register. It wasn't like a thing. Yeah. So head down, do the work, get so good they can't ignore you. Like that's the mojo in my opinion.
I agree with that so much. I think there's so many people out there trying, especially in the world of like instant gratification now. Like people want to be, have a popular show or something like that without having actually done anything before, like you were talking about. Which kind of leaves me like a question I had for you was like, what kind of, for your own personal ego, what kind of confidence boost did you have starting Impact Theory, knowing like doing what you had just done at Quest? Because that was such for those who don't know, like, that was such an accelerated growth of that company. So I imagine like you came out of that. Like what did you feel as a person, from an ego standpoint, like when you came out of that ready to start Impact Theory?
Quest, well, honestly, my whole life leading up to Quest has been wax on, wax off. So if you guys know Karate Kid, mm-hmm. I remember one day they were delivering a bunch of like equipment, like really heavy equipment. The big truck backs up, and all of a sudden we realize we don't have a forklift, and no one knows how to drive a forklift. And I was like, actually, guys, I used to be a forklift driver. Nice. And my dad forced us to get summer jobs when we were kids. And because I was so lazy, I just always worked at whatever company he was working at. So I ended up in a paint warehouse. I manufactured paint for a while, paint stores. And so like all this sort of blue collar work, and literally we recorded a video of me sitting in the forklift unloading this equipment, and I turned to the camera and I said, Dad, wax on, wax off. And it was one of those moments where I realized skill acquisition is the name of the game. Like, acquire as many skills as humanly possible. And I had been, that apply to your goals, obviously. And I had been acquiring so many skills without even really realizing it for so long that it was like, it was getting harder and harder to take me out of my comfort zone, which is awesome, right? And that's like my whole interview strategy on impact theory is I want to know so much about the guests, no matter where they go, I can meet them there. With knowledge, right? That I'm not sort of following them, that I know like what story they're about to tell or where they want to go or what emotion they're trying to create, so I can help facilitate that, or that I can steer them in a direction that I think is more usable to the audience. But it comes from just being really, really prepared. And my life has become an obsession with that, of just learning as much as humanly possible. So going into Quest, it really became like this trial by fire of all the things that I had learned up to that point and whether or not I could stay ahead of that, whether I could begin, because now we knew nothing about manufacturing. So certainly not food manufacturing. So getting into it and having to figure things out, it was having the confidence that we could, right? And so the number one bullet point is in the belief system is you can do anything you set your mind to, right? Like human potential is limitless. And once you believe that human potential is limitless, you can do anything you set your mind to, how you spend your time becomes a spiritual consideration, right? Because you can get great at anything. So going into, okay, I want to help my family, right? They're morbidly obese. I want to make food that they can choose based on taste that happens to be good for them. The mission is to end metabolic disease. And the obstacle standing in my way is I have to figure out how to get this equipment off. I have to figure out how to make it work. We ended up having to re-engineer our own equipment, build stuff from scratch. I mean, it was like this problem that just kept mushrooming and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And to keep up with the scale, so to your point, we grew by 57,000% in 3 years alone. Okay, in manufacturing, that's ridiculous. You're signing leases before like you need it, because when you're doubling like month over month, it's like at first it's manageable, but when you're going from like 5 million to 10 million a month in a month, it's that gets tough, right? Wow. So a lot of it just becomes the risk tolerance of am I willing to place the bet that this is actually going to continue? So it became this trial by fire to see if I could learn fast enough to stay ahead of the curve, to see if we had the willingness to face all the difficulties. I mean, it was a lot of 2 a.m. nights on a Friday. It was the hard grind of having to figure things out in real time. And I think that at the end of the day, I'll never feel like now impact theory is the same, right? Can I learn fast enough to stay ahead of the curve? We're trying to do something that's never been done, build a 21st century studio. I think everybody's doing it in the same way that it's always been done. Literally, movie studios now are built the same way that they were built in like the 1900s, like early 1900s. Disney, just to give you an idea, was founded in 1930. So it's like, nobody's really changed anything. It's obviously they've gotten bigger, they've turned into conglomerates, but in terms of the way that they found it, it's all the same. And so really trying to reinvent that, trying to not go in the system and change it from within, but literally disrupt the system from the outside, like believing in yourself and then figuring out what you actually need to do to pull it off. I mean, that is the game that we're playing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's 2 big questions I want to ask. I'm going to start with one though, and I want you to talk to like our audience who has an idea in their mind about like something they think is cool they might want to try. Maybe it's fitness related. They want the thing like the 6-pack for the first time. But I think a lot of other people, it's like grander things that maybe they are like, I would love to pursue this kind of work or create this company or this kind of endeavor or be a pro athlete in this way, but build it up so much in their mind that they're like, I'll just never be there. And I think from our experience and like listening to you as well, there's like this period of time that you go into, during the hero's journey where you just go away and like no one hears from you from a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you put in the work. And then you start to catch this wave and you start to ride that wave a little bit. And yes, it's hard, but I feel like things like, yes, there's this, but it's, it's going like this. And I'd love to hear you talk to like the audience who's like never experienced that wave, just to let them know that like, it feels possible. Anything feels possible because once you put in that sustained, focused, intentional effort for a certain amount of time, like something magical starts to happen.
So to me, it's all about getting to the physics of the problem, right? So what's the physics of the human condition? Humans are an adaptation machine. Like that, the way that we become the apex predator is not by being the strongest or the smartest. In fact, Darwin is often misquoted as saying it's the survival of the fittest, which he didn't say. What he said was, it's not the smartest of the species that survive, nor the strongest, but rather the most adaptive to change. So what made us so great is through evolution, we have become the most capable of the most diverse array of adaptations. So when they started looking at DNA, and I'm sure you guys know the story, when they finally decoded DNA, they thought all of our problems are going to go away. This is going to be amazing. And hey, it's weird. We only have 20,000 genes, which grapes that make wine have like 40,000. So how is that possible? Like we're so much more complicated than that. Oh, and hey, it's weird. We've got all this junk DNA, but ignore that. And then of course, like if you're looking at the human genome and you go, oh, that's junk DNA. It's like dark matter, right? Let me just make it real easy for you. You just don't understand it yet, right? So the moment you're saying that it's junk DNA, just own that we haven't cracked that code yet. And what they're beginning to realize now is it's epigenetics, right? So you've got this quote unquote junk DNA, which is communicating back to the DNA to say turn on, turn off, right? So it's all this stuff that's essentially looking at your lifestyle, looking at your environment and saying, okay, well, given this very unique set of circumstances, express like this. And we have way more of that than any other species, which is why you can find us in the Arctic. You can find us living in the savannas of Africa, like everywhere. Right? Everywhere on the certainly the dry surface of this planet, you're going to find human beings because we are just wired to adapt. So now if you know that, and I'm a human, and I'm looking at a problem, and I'm saying, well, I'm not very good at this, but I know that the human animal is an adaptation machine. Okay, great. Now what causes the human animal to adapt? Stressors. Awesome. So what do I need to do then if I want to force myself to adapt? You put yourself under the stressors that are directed to get you good at that thing, right? So learning boxing, right? There's just going to be certain things you're going to have to do. Learning how to throw a punch, employing what Bruce Lee said, kick until you no longer think kick, you just kick, right? So you're going to punch till you no longer think punch, you just punch. You're going to practice dodging till you no longer think dodge, you just dodge, right? So I saw this great clip on Reddit where this referee gets in so close because they're in the clinch. One of the guys pulls back and just throws this Hail Mary and the ref just out of the way. And I thought, any money, that guy's a boxer. He's been doing this forever. He didn't have to think dodge. Out of the corner of his eye, he sees a punch coming. It's so instinctual that he just moves out of the way. That's practice, that's repetition. So putting yourself in a situation where you're stressing yourself, where your body has to adapt or die, right? And that's where most people fall down. They're not prepared to stress themselves to the point where the body says adapt or die. And I remember when I first started working out in the gym, I would just repeat that over in my head, adapt or die, adapt or die, adapt or die. And then I was trying to push myself into so much screaming discomfort that my body literally was left with no choice. It sucks. It's not fun. And that's where most people stop. And it applies whether it's the body or business.
Dude.
It's really interesting though, because like the formula is to, it's just like failure. You have to fail to succeed. And so you have to go through that pain. But most people just think it's just pain. It's never going to be anything more than that pain. They don't see the other side of that, which is you have to go through the pain to experience like that new adaptation.
And can we say something in a really hateful way? That's just fucking stupid.
I know.
Like, how can you look at all of human history? And this is me speaking to my younger self, by the way. I did not escape this. I fell prey to this stupid ideology for so long that your talents and intelligence are born. That's it. You get what you've got. And your life is meant to be to make the most of it. That is literally to fail to recognize that humans became the apex predator because of our ability to change. So if you know that that's how we got here, either you're saying, I am so fucking unique that I'm the only human ever that's not able to change, or you can just own, I'm too fucking lazy.
Yeah.
And hey, if you're too lazy, fantastic. No worries. Like, I don't think the vast majority of people should listen to my advice because I am not going to give you a stress-free life. So if you want a stress-free life, I'm not your guy.
Yeah. And I think we talk about all the time, like the reason like I like do boxing or like we do a lot of things is because like we just believe that like putting yourself in these positions that are painful, that are uncomfortable, that stretch you, like
like that's how you build this mental muscle to like go on and take on the next thing, to try to make this positive change in your life in another area, or start that business, or whatever it is. I don't necessarily want to just use business. I know a lot of people like have these specific goals, whether it's like to get a PhD or whatever it is, but putting yourself in a position to do stuff that just sucks. And so for you personally, like what kind of stuff do you put in your life to just build that mental strength consistently?
The easiest one, and this will obviously resonate with your audience, the easiest one is the gym. So I hate the gym. I am literally a morbidly obese man hiding in a lean man's body. And if you saw my family, you would understand like how true that is. And I have very thrifty genetics. I would survive a famine, to be sure. I can turn a calorie into like 8 pounds of fat. It's actually impressive. On a cheat day, you can hear me getting fatter. It's actually a little bit distracting. And going to the gym is more than anything a way for me to earn credibility with myself. I don't like it, but I do it 5 days a week. And that is important to me to gut check myself all the time, right? And it's both my biggest frustration about the gym and its most powerful aspect is that it's a Sisyphusian battle. Just when you're making progress, if you stop, it rolls back down. And so you have to constantly push that boulder up the hill. There's no crossing the finish line in fitness, right? Take a month off, you'll notice the difference. So knowing that you have to show up and earn your physique every day, like that to me is what I hate about it, because it takes so much time and energy, but is also why it makes me proud of myself and it makes me feel good about who I am. And it gives me that little win. And it's such proof positive that you can make change. And if you can translate, because no one will argue, literally no one will argue that you can change your body. People argue that you can change your mind. And that's what's like, literally, I don't understand. Like, I get it. Science for so long said, oh, your brain, you're born with the number of brain cells and that's it. And you're never going to get more. And then, of course, science is backtracking like mad, as it should, because the truth is obviously you can create new neurons even, up until the day you die. So brain plasticity is so incredibly important for people to understand. But if you can do it with your body and you can literally watch your biceps getting bigger and you can lift a weight today that you couldn't yesterday, then it's a pretty small step to going, I can learn something today that I didn't know yesterday. I can apply that skill. And that to me, like the gym is just that constant reminder of that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other habits besides the gym? Things that you say to yourself, mantras,
self-hypnosis,
even like weird activites that.
Because I'm so lazy, I have to have routines and what I call bright lines, which I didn't make that up. I read that somewhere, but I need routines and bright lines in order to get me through the day. So I go to bed like a religion at 9 p.m. I wake up when I wake up. I don't use an alarm. I haven't used an alarm in probably 14 years at this point. So I get as much sleep as I need. Now, I'm very fortunate that due to the levels of excitement in my life, like I just wake up. So I usually get between 5 and 6 hours. I immediately go to the gym, work out. Then after that, I immediately meditate, because I find that the juxtaposition of the high intensity dripping with sweat going to how rapidly can I control my breathing, how rapidly can I get out of fight or flight, which is the sympathetic nervous system, get into the parasympathetic nervous system of rest and digest, like how fast can I make that transition, which just has wonderful applications in all areas of your life. So I do that. And then after I finish meditating, which I normally meditate for about 20 minutes, I do what I call thinkitating, which is leveraging the alpha wave state that you get your brain into while you meditate in order to think about some of the biggest problems that I face. I'm reading this book right now called Barking Up the Wrong Tree, about how what people perceive as making them successful actually isn't usually. And it talks about how 72% of people have new ideas in the shower. Why? Because you slip into an alpha wave state. You start to daydream, right? You just relax, you get in that state. So I found it very frustrating that in meditation I was doing my best to clear my mind when I'm having some of my best ideas. So by knowing that, okay, get into the alpha wave state, after that, then you're gonna be able to think take notes, like whatever you want to do, that became really important for me to actually being able to calm my mind. So I do that. Once I finish thinkitating, then I read. I try to read for about an hour a day, but it depends on what time I woke up. If I happen to wake up late that day for whatever reason, then I might trim some of my reading. And then I keep a list of the most important things that I should be working on for the business, and I try to live in that list. So if you look at me at any point during my day, I'm either going through that list or executing on something on that list. And then after that, it's my day's a wild card.
That's awesome. Something that I'm really curious about is finding out like what your tragic flaw is or was, or you're dealing with. I don't think we ever get rid of it, but I feel like everyone who views you, you're like, oh, this dude created Quest, he's crushing it. Sick house in Hollywood Hills, like this guy doesn't have like issues now, he's cool. But what I've noticed is like I lead a lot of people through like guided meditations, and even in my own life, like Dan and I have done this, we discover this like core wound that lies in us. And like every time, like for myself or with Dan or with clients, like when people move through that core wound or tragic flaw or just overarching limiting belief that comes from like impression at a young age, when they move past that, they just let go of so much of this like tension and energy that's been pulling them down, and they can just fly and they feel good. And for some people, it's like something really tragic at a young age, maybe there was sexual molestation, or maybe it's something like they just remember when they were like 6 years old, like their mom told them, you know what, like you're never gonna do anything past like this, and it got imprinted. So if you're willing and you're open, I would be really curious to hear like, is there something for you at a young age that you had to go back and like deal with that has allowed you to like open up and be so comfortable with the uncomfortable?
I never had a lightning rod moment. I am very grateful that my parents sort of lived the cliche of they waited until I left for college to get divorced. So I had both parents with me the whole time, and I was too oblivious to realize that it was a strained relationship. So literally for me, it like came out of the blue. So I had a good childhood. I absolutely hated that somebody could tell me what to do, but so I've pushed back against that my whole life, and I have a real problem with authority. But my mom was sort of the indomitable force that kept me in check, which I've got all kinds of amazing stories about that. She was always my biggest cheerleader. So from like a childhood perspective, I'm very, very fortunate. My big thing was always, I didn't think I was good enough. So I had a fixed mindset. I always felt like I identified, this is so sad to me. Have you guys seen the movie Amadeus?
No, I haven't.
All right. An amazing story about Mozart, Amadeus Mozart. And in that, there's this character named Salieri. And Salieri, I don't know if he's like a real character or not, or if he was just put into the movie. That I actually don't know. And in it, Salieri says, I'm just good enough to realize how much better Mozart is. And when he said that, I was like, that's me. That's how I feel. Like I was just smart enough to realize how much smarter other people were. I was just good enough at writing to realize how much better other people were. I was just good enough at filmmaking to realize how much better other people were. I was just smart enough that I could tell how bad at business I was. And from that came crushing anxiety. And because I couldn't like reconcile my grand ambition with this sense that I'm not good enough. And so I kept putting myself in these situations where I had this overwhelming sense of not being good enough, but that I had to keep going. So always putting myself in a situation where I was worse than other people, but not believing I could be better. So there was like this sense of like trying to hide my inadequacies, which made me feel so fucking uncomfortable. So I never went and got diagnosed, but I'll just tell you, I developed clinical levels of anxiety. And from that, like learning to unwind that, because I remember like one day thinking, so I'm obsessed with like superheroes and comic books and all that. And I remember thinking, when I'm not anxious, my mind makes me feel superhuman. I feel like with all that I've read and learned, like I really feel powerful. But when I'm anxious, it is like fucking kryptonite. And now that I understand what's actually happening, the blood is literally leaving the prefrontal cortex. So you're going into fight or flight mode. So you don't have higher cognitive function. So literally all those things that like made me feel powerful were actually gone. So it wasn't like I was just perceiving it that way. That's actually what it was. And so I would say my adult life has really been framed by my battle with anxiety and trying to find ways, which is one of the things that led me to meditation, to like really being able to de-escalate that. I would say that I still struggle, not profoundly like I used to, but it's an issue. So, and I think that's something, especially because of living a life in front of the camera and doing things in front of crowds and speaking, that people like, even though I tell them like, no, for real, like even my own wife, who, when I say she knows the depths to which I have struggled with it, she's like, oh yeah, fuck, I always forget because I'm putting in the work to like still move forward, still do the things, even though, and I remember in high school promising myself, I'll never do anything that, and I thought of it back then as being nervous. I'll never do anything again that makes me nervous. I have not done a good job of making good on that promise, but like that's sort of how an ever-present part of my life it's been.
Interesting. I'm really interested about, because I've struggled with social anxiety as a kid, and a lot of what I talk to the audience about is our audience is explaining to them that things like social anxiety, just because you still might have it, it's not necessarily something you defeat forever. You just learn to live with it well and go through life. Like, what's your perspective on that and having anxiety? And like, is it something that you feel like you've moved past, or you have it and it's ingrained in you?
I've gotten so much better, but I know enough about the brain to know that you've wired for it. So you develop anxiety because you're obsessively imagining things going wrong. So your brain, in an attempt to protect you from that, actually hardwires so that you recognize the dangerous situation really fucking early so that you can get yourself out of it. Now, it's all false. And you've created that situation because neurons that fire together wire together. So if I were to go, God, what if I go up to give this speech and like I forget what I'm going to say and the audience is heckling me and I've worked so hard to build this audience and I go up and I embarrass myself, and then like what's going to happen to like my social following? Like, is it all going to fall apart, right? So that doesn't make any sense. Like, knowing the way that the brain works, if I think of giving a speech and I think of all the things that could go wrong, like that's what's going to wire it together. So if those are lies, right, because the future outcome is unknown. So if I'm going to lie to myself, why would I ever lie in the negative? So what I do now is I obsessively imagine things going right. Like, imagine how awesome this is going to be. I'm going to go up and fuck crush it. This is going to be amazing. This is where I shine. Like, this is what I do. And so when you force yourself, because it is very much me forcing myself to think obsessively about how it's going to go right, how right it's going to go, it's going to be amazing, going to be my chance to shine, I can feel my brain rewiring. And I can feel things that used to be really fucking anxiety producing are not at all now. Things that were, that still like trigger a little bit would have been impossible for me before. And so it's like, I can just feel that it's like sliding up, right? So that if you, and we now film some of this behind the camera, if I'm going up to give a speech, I absolutely have to meditate right before they bring me on stage. Otherwise, I'll be a fucking mess. So I just know that about myself. I know, like, by practicing meditation and literally just learning to diaphragm breathe and learning to rapidly get myself out of fight or flight. So as I can feel the anxiety building up, like I know all the things, like how to hold my hands, how to breathe, like all of it to just physiologically get me out of that state, to then re-put my mind somewhere positive. If I'm really feeling it, I'll put on Jay-Z, which is, to me,
which song?
It really depends. Ham, Prime Time, like a lot of the stuff from what he did with Kanye. Thank you. Yeah, Watch the Throne. Mm-hmm. That album for me, I absolutely fucking love that. He is the epitome of being cocksure. And that's exactly how he makes me feel. There's no better way to say it. It's just, you're feeling cocksure, like totally confident in your ability to go out and have swagger. And that's what I need when I'm walking on stage. That's
I love that, man. I love that too, because that takes it so far past this idea of when people say, oh, just think positively. And then like it's like what you just described there is like, think positively in this very detailed, this is exactly how you get it done. Like you have to anchor. Like years and years of like, rewiring, like reprogramming your mind, basically.
Literally, so it's a process called myelination, where your brain's an adaptation machine, right? It's going to be the theme of my talk here. And what that means is the brain has all these kinds of mechanisms to make things easier for you, to put things on autopilot, right? To punch until you don't think punch, you just punch. Now, what's actually going on in the brain is where you get these connections between neurons, and it's like very intricate. It's not just two neurons, it's like millions of neurons for any one like activity if you're getting really good at it. And what it's doing is it's wrapping this fatty tissue around the connection points so that the electrical impulses can travel faster, right? So you're literally making a superhighway to, most people build it to anxiety, most people build it to stress, to fear, but you can do that same thing by building it to something positive, by feeling confident, by whatever, by practicing it and really getting good and wiring those things together. But it's a physical process, so it takes time. And just like I can't remember who said this quote, but it's so important to me. The only way to build something new is not to fight the old, but rather put all of your energy into building the new. The same is true of the brain. Like, don't sit there and try to like unwire the anxiety. Just try to rewire for positive stuff. And as the anxiety begins to atrophy, it will literally just naturally unwire because the brain is going to reallocate those resources to this new thing that you're building. So that to me is just like understanding the neuroanatomy of the brain has been one of the most important things for me.
Yeah. For understanding that, what would you like, just for the audience, like quick like book recommendation, video?
100%.
Series?
So first of all, I've put a book list together, the top 25 books I think anybody trying to be successful should read on there. There's probably 3 or 4 books on neurology, which you can find on impacttheory.com. The ones that I'll just like, hey, just blunt force trauma. Go read everything by David Eagleman and read everything by V.S. Ramachandran. If you do those 2 guys, like they will take you a long way. They make it super accessible.
Very nice. And so, like you point out a lot of tactics when you're talking about rewiring your brain. Like obviously you anchor yourself with the music you listen to that like bop gets you right back in the state, like the Tony Robbins type thing. Do you also do like visualization? Do you watch yourself performing on stage? Or
I'm actually really bad at visualization. So I have a narrator that's kind of like the voice in Shawshank Redemption, where I literally will describe the scene to myself. So this is, imagine you're in my head. I'll just say it out loud. You walk on stage, the lights hit you. This is your moment to shine. You feel super confident. All eyes are on you, and you want those eyes on you, because that's where I think people fuck themselves up. They think all of a sudden all eyes are on them and they're like, oh God, they have this overwhelming sense of they don't want it because they haven't rehearsed wanting that, right? Mm-hmm. The whole fucking reason you've walked down on stage is because you want people to pay attention. So just own it. Don't be weird about it. So I say in my head, you want those eyes on you. You want people paying attention to you. You're going to hold their attention and you're going to go, wherever the moment takes you, exactly, like these things are so real to you. Don't worry about a script. Don't worry about any of that. Like walk people through what you've done or whatever it is that I'm there to talk about. And I just narrate it like that. I enjoy being able to walk out onto the stage before I give a talk, but it's not like, I'm not one of those people that has to go out there and own it. Like I've just thought so many times about this kind of thing, that kind of moment, how it's going to feel, how I'm going to crush it, that I just slip back into that narrator's voice for a brief moment, which is weird for a guy that's so heavily into film and visual arts. There's a condition where people cannot visually imagine things. And when I read about that, I was like, oh my God, that's me. I realize it's not, and I actually do envision a lot, but I have a really hard time closing my eyes and then seeing something clearly. It's all like super fucking ephemeral. But words, that's my jam. Like I can walk through that narration and it just feels real.
It's so good. Because I think a lot of people, like we just released an episode on our YouTube channel today about meditation and talking about like the different forms you can use to kind of program your mind, just brainwash yourself into like stepping into the identity that you want. I think a problem is like a lot of people are like, well, I can't visualize. Like I just don't see anything when I close my eyes. And whether that's like the muscle of like trying to do it is weak, or maybe like they just need the affirmation in their head. They need the narrator, They need to have, the Shawshank Redemption voice or Morgan Freeman or Denzel Washington, right. One of these people in their head giving affirmations. And so I love that.
Yeah.
I know you've read the book Sapiens and Homo Deus.
Deus? I don't know how to say it. Chase has heckled me because I think I say it wrong. How do you say it?
Homo Deus.
Homo Deus.
Amadeus.
All right,
Okay.
there it is.
Love that book. But basically, for anyone who hasn't read these 2 books, you should definitely read them. They're
Most definitely.
amazing. But like you're doing all this work with X Prize right now. So when we're talking about like legacy, like you're building this awesome studio. But 50 years from now, the human species could be in a very interesting position. You know, when we talk about like connecting the conscious to the unconscious, and basically like Elon Musk has some of that stuff going right now with Neuralink. I just love to hear your opinion since you're so plugged into that world with the work that you do. Like, where do you think humans are going to be like 50 years from now?
Well, I'm super stoked you're bringing this kind of stuff up. This is my jam. And I think that we will cross the singularity, so it becomes very hard to talk about. So the singularity is borrowed from physics. In physics, when you cross the event horizon of a black hole, they think that the physics of a black hole will be so weird that we don't know what happens. And so Kurzweil borrowed that term saying, we will hit a point at which technology will evolve so rapidly that we can't predict it now. So I'll walk you up to that moment and tell you where I think we're going pre-singularity, where it just becomes like anybody's guess. I think without question, have you read the book Fahrenheit 451?
I haven't, no.
All right, absolutely amazing book about a future world where in society, just to contain everybody, they don't want people thinking crazy thoughts, so they just burn books and it's illegal to read. And of course, that spawns this second society, which then lives outside of the cities, like off in the woods, and they read. And that is going to happen, I promise you, between people that augment themselves and people that don't. And you're going to get people that go like a purity route and they push back. And here's the problem. They will lose. Now, how do I know they'll lose? Because the people that augment themselves will become so much more powerful and so much more intelligent that like there's just nowhere, like if you're trapped in biology, there's nowhere for you to go. Evolution only happens so rapidly. We're already at the point, as you know from reading Homo Deus, like we're already at the point where we've already taken control of evolution. Like we can already do so much from a purely biological standpoint. If you're watching this right now and you don't know about CRISPR-Cas9, CRISPR-Cas9, like that, CRISPR-Cas9, I was like, there's something wrong with that. CRISPR-Cas9, absolutely insane. You can go in and edit DNA right now today. You can edit fucking DNA. Like that is insane to me. And they basically have taken, God, I think it's a virus, and it's the defenses that bacteria use to defeat viruses. Absolutely crazy. And what it does is bacteria doesn't have its own immune system, so it uses CRISPR-Cas9 as a way to memorize, like here's a virus that tried to attack me before, so I've memorized it, and when I see it, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna snip I'm gonna snip that virus and fuck it up and like basically put something in it that breaks it. And so I forget the person, I think it was a woman that discovered this and realized that if we can harness that and give it something new, say HIV, and say, this is the thing that you want to go disrupt, then you could put that in a human cell and it would go in and edit that. And they've made glow-in-the-dark cats, that's real. They've made, oh God, goats that spin spider web in their milk. I'm almost certain it's a goat. It's definitely something with udders where they got it has spider web in its milk. It's just like, it's crazy what they can do with this stuff. So we can already do that. Then you've got what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink and like, where's that going to go? And I think that that's going to advance very rapidly. Cochlear implants are already real. You can take somebody who is deaf. They have never had hearing ever. And you can put something in their brain. Literally, have you seen somebody with these things?
It's crazy.
They drill in their skull. They put electrodes in their brain and they can now hear. That's today. So what's this look like 50 years from now? And let's say you think that my timelines are just fucked up. Great. What's it look 500 years from now, right? This is a one-way street, boys and girls. Why? Because technology is hope. As long as technology is hope of a better life, you cannot stop it. You can try, you can be draconian, you can slow it down, you might even stop it for a year, 100 years, 1,000, but you're never going to eradicate the human desire for a better future. You're just not. So this is a one-way street. So we're just going to keep going down that path. If you're familiar with Michio Kaku's notion of like civilizations and how they move up, and I think a level 5 civilization is one that can harness the power of a star, and once you can do that, you can warp space-time. Like now it starts getting really weird. So that to me is fascinating. What's really interesting isn't necessarily even where we go past the singularity, where it's like, I like to envision, because I'm very optimistic, I like to envision a world where it's just total techno optimism. We're able to bend space and time and just do incredible, beautiful, amazing things. The interesting thing to talk about is what happens during the friction, where you get people who are beginning to augment themselves and you get people who aren't, where we have to make decisions about AI. Because think about a human as biological AI. That's all we are, in my opinion. But we've got all these things hardwired into us about emotion, compassion, empathy. And the most important one, that humans are an active species. So if you put us somewhere, we just have an instinct to master it, to go in and take over that domain. So you've got to give AI desire. And that's where I'm like, AI is never going to accidentally like do something crazy. You're going to tell it to go do something. And so what we tell it to do is where it gets interesting. And I think this is where Elon Musk is like, hey, will somebody please like start regulating this stuff about what you can tell it to do, what you can tell it to want, what the driving forces are that you give that AI. And I think if we turn inwards, we'll find very, very interesting things. But, and I will stop myself. This was such a dangerous question for me because I could talk about this all day.
That's great, man.
But like, if you really stop and ask yourself, like, is jealousy useful? Is anger useful? Is hatred useful? I think they are. I think that they make us human. And I think if you take those out, all those things that people fight for, when you think about them bifurcating and it becoming augmented, non-augmented, people that hate AI, don't want it to come into existence, they have to accept there are all these ugly things in humanity. And my question is, do you give them to AI? And I think that what we're going to see is until you can replicate a human, you're just not there yet. Like you haven't gotten, like we're so general in our intelligence. And that's where people fall down. It's very easy to create highly specific AI. It is super difficult to make general AI that can adapt. And so I think we're going to see that some of these things that we want to just sort of eradicate from humans, you're not going to be able to. And you're actually going to need to program it into robots and like an AI. Like, where does that all go? I honestly, like, I don't think I'm the guy to answer that question. I don't necessarily want to, but wow, from what it tells us about being a human today, I'm deeply in love with that.
Yeah, and we have conversations about this all the time. Like we nerd out over it, just thinking about, well, like what you said, like the whole stream of this conversation around like adapting your mind and like where AI is going. It all kind of goes the same way. Like we need, I mean, in my opinion, we just need to reach like a higher threshold of humans who want to adapt their brain and like realize that like I'm in the matrix. I can control this thing. This is the muscle. I can create things out there using this thing in here, for us to really be able to all go into AI and be able to program these things to act the way we want to with the ethics and like managing that. And how do we deal with people who are just like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with any of this. And yeah, it's a fun, exciting thing. I really am interested in learning more, but
how does any of that future technology play into what you're doing or planning to do with impact theory?
It's actually really important to us. So part of our business model is exponential technologies that allow us to make things on demand. So read the book Hit Makers, and it gave me the words. I already had an intuitive understanding of this, but it gave me the words. You need to be able to survive as a creative studio. You need to be able to survive a 1 in 1,000 hit rate. And how do you do that, right? How do you do that when movies cost a lot of money, books take a lot of time, comic books take time? So to really pull that off, you've got to be able to monetize in a way that's atypical. So our goal is to leverage the crowd to come up with ideas so that you're basically distributing the cost. So yes, it takes somebody's time out there, but it takes very little. Once you distribute it across a lot of people, it's not any one person suffering the 1,000 losses, right? So you distribute that out. So the crowd will submit ideas, the crowd will vet ideas, you look for virality. Okay, now once we have virality, then how do we monetize? Because even the virality, not all of it's going to work. So let's say that we get 1,000 ideas, 10 of them hit. Now, I don't want to put resources behind them if I'm not going to be able to monetize it. So then let's say I make action figures, shirts, and bed sheets, and all the things that come with. I mean, just think of all the things Disney makes for all their properties. We'd want to make all the same things. So now you make that for those 10, looking for, again, like what are people now willing to actually spend their money on? And if you have to hold inventory in that, you're screwed. But now that 3D manufacturing is coming online, now that printing on demand is coming online, like we're able to leverage those technologies and do it early because they're still in a deceptive phase where it actually technically, God, I forget the name that Peter gives it. It's not, so 3D printing, for instance, was deceptive for a long time. Then it hit the hype cycle, and then everybody, I think it's like disillusionment, where you come crashing down and everybody thinks, oh man, see, I knew it, 3D printing is bullshit. Like this cycle is so predictable. So yes, it hasn't yet lived up to the hype because journalists and other people online, they're going to hype things up too early before you're actually able to meet that demand. Think about VR, think about augmented reality. That's where it all is right now. Like overhyped and now people are disillusioned. But I promise you, AR is the future. Like it's the future. Like just embrace it. You can take this clip and play it back. I promise you 10 years from now, it'll seem self-evident. The same is true with 3D printing. So you're going to be 3D printing houses. You're going to be 3D printing businesses, clothes, fabrics. Like it on and on it will go. We're not there yet. But like if you just think about food, by the way, which is, I used to think about that at Quest all the time. Like, dude, we're going to get fucking disrupted by ultimately you're just going to be the manufacturer of the ingredients that you send to put in people's ink cartridges and the recipes, right? And so if we couldn't see that, and look, the problem is, how far away is that? Is that 3 years? Yeah. Is it 30 years? So getting that timing right is super critical, but that was something that I really thought a lot about. So anyway, being able to look for the virality, only back things that are working, never have to hold inventory so that we have the resources that we can apply as something pops. So take the 1,000, boils down to 10, the 10 boil down to the 1, and then you bet on the 1. Then you can do the movie. Then you can hold inventory because it's worked its way through so many stages of approval, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting that you're doing that technology so much. What about like with the actual like production of what you're creating? Because I think a lot of like people are seeing that like attention is back on like the people, you know, like we just started making videos about jump rope and then like the attention just gathered. So have you looked into like, like this person has a YouTube channel about this topic I'm really interested in. They already have 10 million people who are interested in it. I could leverage that into producing something and knowing there's gonna be an audience that goes with it. Like, I feel like that is the future because everyone's creating all these little pockets of their own TV shows and they just need, you know, pro level production to like take to the next level.
I couldn't agree more. So I believe that how long it will last, I don't yet know, but probably a very long time. We're living through the age of the personal brand, right? I mean, you guys are living proof.
Absolutely.
And I think that's amazing because it's now putting the power in the individual's hand. There's no longer a gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is whether your content is good. So that is insanely powerful for us. That's why we're doing the social content. That's why we're building a community first. So this is like back at Quest. I mean, this is like Quest Playbook 101. We had a decision to make. Do we go in store first or do we go online first and build an audience? It'd be slower, but do we do that? And to me, the answer was very obvious. You go online first, you can build a community. If I go to a store directly, they believe that they're the kingmaker. And in fairness, they are, right? They're going to make you exist. One day you're not on shelves and nobody knows who you are. The next day you're on shelves. But when that happens, and this is why distribution had always controlled so many of these things, or the networks on TV controlled what actors ended up making it. The movie studios controlled who ended up, becoming a movie star. And now it's like or singing. Wow, that's like another big one, right? You might have a band that you watch and you love and you think they're the best things ever. Like, how are they not getting play? Because they didn't know how to break into the radio scheme where it's like you have to go and get DJs to play you, and it's like payola and all this stuff, right? So going to the stores, I knew these guys are going to give us very unfavorable contracts. It's going to put us in a very weak position. So we went online, we built a community, and then people were going into the stores every day and demanding Quest. So the stores were calling us. So now we can negotiate much better terms of the contract, which is why we were able to keep up with our growth because we actually had profitability. So Now, as I'm doing impact theory, thinking, okay, learn my lesson, I want to make sure that we control the audience so that, because I know the play is not in the actual intellectual property, which I'll call the shout, it's in the echo, which is all of the merchandising. So our business model is merch. Our business model is not go make a TV show, go make a film. We're going to do that, and that's very important, and it should be profitable. But we don't, if we do it right, don't need it to be profitable because we'll make the money in the merchandise. So that's why we give all of our content away. Everything that we do at Impact Theory is free, because I want to train people, having learned my lesson. Don't think of me as a protein bar company, motherfuckers. Like, you need to understand like what this company is. We are here to pull people out of the matrix. We will do anything that makes sense with that. Self-signaling is such a huge deal, which is why I can sell bed sheets and t-shirts with good conscience, knowing this is how you reinforce ideology in your mind. As long as that ideology is empowering, those bricks you were talking about, giving to people and seeing how many they stack, like that to me is what it's all about. Like I want people to have just this constant echo of this ideology so they're building their mindset brick by brick. So that is going to be really important to us. And that's all stemming from understanding that I can make myself a personal brand. I can get out there. People feel attached to me. And what I tell people is imagine for a second that we can build an audience of 10 million people, which compared to like the Kardashians, that's actually really small. And if of those 10 million people, 10% believe that I have made their life fundamentally different and better. It's 1 million people that believe that I have positively impacted their life. Now when I say, hey, we've got a movie or a comic book or a TV show, go check it out. They're going to do it. 1 million people, I won't even count on the other 9 million who are just interested. 1 million people believe that I fundamentally made their lives better. They're going to go do what I ask. And as long as I never abuse them, as long as I never take them for granted, as long as they feel what I know, which is they are the head and I'm merely the neck, I can turn them where I want them turned, but ultimately it's their decision, whether something is good, brings value, whatever. So, and I think people can feel like if I go do a speech, I will stay, I've stayed up till, I think 8 hours is my record of just answering questions. I will stay there. I don't let people troll me, but if you actually have a real question, I will stay there and answer them until they're all done. So that people know, like, I am doing this to pull people out of the matrix, right? I'm already rich. So I could have just bought an island and retired. That's not the game plan. The game plan is to absolutely make way more money than I've ever made in the past. But I believe if you make the demand that you make that money in service of other people, that there's no beef. So that is how this is all going to play. To bring it back to your question, that's only possible because we're living through the age of the personal brand.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have like a piece of, I'm just curious, like a piece of content in mind that like, you know, because you talk about Disney a lot and wanting to, you know, have this like high production value. Is there a particular, and you're a huge comic book fan, like is there a particular piece or type of content that you're like, this is going to be the first one that I want to hit? Or something that you'd be comfortable sharing? Yeah,
for sure. So I tried to get the rights to The Matrix. I just straight went and asked. And I learned a very powerful lesson. You don't get laid if you don't ask. So I went and asked. They said no. They did announce, though, that they're now rebooting the franchise. Some secret little part of me wants to think that I helped fan those flames a bit. But who knows? And that is, I think, have you guys read Off to Be the Wizard?
No.
It's a fiction book, which I only read one fiction book a year. That happened to be mine this year. So I just read that. And it's basically The Matrix, but like a whole different spin on it. So we'll create our own version of The Matrix because the notion of reality being editable, the notion of reality as God, I lost my train of thought. Of reality being something that is manipulatable, like that to me is at the core of my existence. So we need to create a universe that allows us to tell stories within that. But a few movies that I wish we had made, The Matrix, I wish we had made Star Wars, I wish we had made Taken. Those are all things that I think have very empowering ideology. And maybe Taken the least, but the other ones are very, very merchandisable. And my pitch when I went in to convince them to let me run with The Matrix was that it should be one of the most enduring film franchises. And it's not. And it should have been one of the most merchandised pieces of intellectual property ever. And it's not. And so I think that they missed the boat on what's happened today, which is adults now buy merchandise, and they didn't. And so they thought, oh God, like this doesn't really merchandise to kids. And so what do we do? But I'll tell you, every year at Christmas, when people ask me what I want, I go and search to see if there's Matrix merchandise that they can buy me, because it's just that important to me, and I want things to signal back to me.
So good. And I just love the whole movement here. You know, like this is what we're about. This is what Zen Do Fitness about. We're right there. We're riding with you, man. We're on the same wave. And it's just about reconditioning people's minds to believe in more possibilities, to believe in their limitless potential. And so it makes me so happy because we went through this wave. Like, I don't watch TV. Like, I don't know anyone who watches TV who's in my circle, because a lot of it's just like crap that's going on in the reality TV, and like people get sucked into that, and then you're at dinner having a conversation about an argument that like two desperate housewives had on a TV show, versus like making a show that like people like start to ask questions about the reality they're living in and question what's possible for them and the people they love. And so, dude, I'm so happy you're doing what you're doing. And
Thank you, man.
yeah,
It's
honestly,
very important. It's very important.
So should we wrap it?
Yeah, I think, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on this special edition of the Zen Dude Fitness Show. Before we go, I would like to ask Tom, tell me your, where can we find you? What do you want people to hear the most?
At Tom Bilyeu across all socials. I'm hyper active
He's
on
on
social.
it.
So
And great stuff. Definitely follow this dude.
thank you. And if you get a like from me or a comment, that is actually me. So I don't
Nice.
I don't source it out to anybody. That's me.
That's
Very zen,
amazing.
dude.
All right, you guys. If you like the show, subscribe, like the video, comment below with any questions, and we'll see you in the next episode.